Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome everyone to our class. I'm going to bring up the slide deck so that we can start sharing from it. And we are in chapters 4 and 5 of Melech Aleph, or the First Kings. And hopefully everyone's enjoying the series. I'm in my basement here on Saturday, so it's a little bit quieter. And we're going to go right to the slide deck, cover some material that we've been able to cover before, and especially the idea that now there's a very capable unified kingdom stretching literally from the Tigris and Euphrates all the way through the Levant, down into the Egypt or Egyptian Sinai border. It encroaches upon Tyre and Sidon, the great Phoenician peoples, and is at least accommodating Philistia, the Philistines. And we know archaeologically that's accurate. There'll be some mention of the Philistines, the Plishtim, and the chapters that we read today. But it's a vast kingdom, and it's kind of a repeat, I know, but because of this, the great trade routes, all the spices and wonderful silks and material from the Silk Road coming up through Sumer and Akkad, up to the Tigris and Euphrates, modern day Iraq into Syria, and then certainly all of the wonderful frankincense, myrrh, and the alums that are coming up from Yemen. And we'll be talking in the coming chapter specifically about a very powerful kingdom based both in Yemen today and what is Ethiopia or Eritrea, and the great Sayan or Seva kingdom. And this will be the early progenitor of the later Ethiopian kingdom. And so a lot of history to cover, and it's all very, very exciting. Next, again, just a reminder, this is Zion, the city of David, the old Jebusite citadel that he took over. There is a running and ever-flowing spring there. Later, it will be established a pool of Salome or Siloam that we'll see in the Gospels. North and east of that is the Temple Mount, Mount Moriah, and this is where Solomon will build the temple. And it's going to be a fabulous structure indeed. If we go and look at some of the archaeological just thoughts, rendering of what the temple could look like, we really don't know what Solomon's temple at all, other than the basic Temple Mount. But one of the things that now we do know without a doubt, because great archaeological effort has been done in the last 20 years in East Jerusalem, Yerushalayim, and they have found a 10th century, which would be the 900s BC, structures, massive walls that meet the expectation and the descriptions that you would see clearly at the time of Solomon. And it's a very wonderful thing to behold and find this wonderful archaeological digging that has occurred. And I'm going to move over to the next slide. And as you can see, this is the existing Temple Mount. That is the western wall, or the Wailing Wall. And that is where the Jewish people have contact with the closest proximity to where the second temple actually stood. That is the current Temple Mount. The Al-Aqsa Mosque sits on what is believed the very site of the temple. Beautiful picture, by the way, of the Temple Mount there in Jerusalem or Yerushalayim. And if we go to the next slide, here is some of the actual archaeological digging that's occurred. And you can see that this stone structure, this is how archaeologists know what they're talking about, is very different than, say, over here, where you have 1st century BCE, 1st century CE hewn rock that Herod was very much involved in, or certainly much later, the medieval structures that came up after the Byzantine period and then on into the Arabic period. And so this absolutely is consistent with 10th century structures, meaning the wall around Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. We'll see that at Megiddo, we'll see it at Hatzor, and we'll see it at Beersheba, the three fortified citadels that Solomon, Shlomo will build up. And it's really cool to see all this archaeology coming out in the last 20 years. Here's another shot of it, and you can see this is the older 10th century BCE Solomonic wall. You can clearly see what was 1st century BCE, 1st century CE, King Herod structure, and then on up to medieval. And you can always tell medieval because you have the classic castle structure going on there. And just a couple of more points in the slide deck. I will read this in the narrative today. Adonai Elohim gave Solomon exceptional wisdom and understanding, as well as a heart as vast as the sandy beach by the sea. Well, that's enormous. That's a vast amount of knowledge. Solomon's wisdom surpassed the wisdom of the people from the east and all the wisdom of Egypt. Well, all the wisdom of Egypt collectively is literally, at this point, almost 3,000 years of knowledge. The most knowledgeable people on the planet were the Egyptians. He was wiser than everyone, wiser than Itan, the Ezraki, don't know who he was, wiser than Heman, Kalko, and Darda, the sons of Michal, don't know who they were. Evidently, they were very, very wise, so that his fame spread to all the surrounding nations. He composed 3,000 proverbs and 1,005 songs. And if that's the case, then we have only a fraction of what has survived. He could discuss trees from the cedars of Lebanon to the hyssop growing out of the wall. He could discuss wild animals, poultry, reptiles, and fish. People from all the nations came to hear the wisdom of Solomon, including kings from all over the earth who had heard about his wisdom. And as an example of that, in the last chapter, we read about how there were two women. They were prostitutes. Both had young children. One, unfortunately, was killed when the mother rolled over on it and suffocated it. The other one did not, but the other one, jealous, took the live child, claimed it was hers, and brought them to Solomon. And he, in one of his very early rulings, simply said, well, let's just take a sword and cut it in two. And the real mother said, no, no, no. If it means the death of my child, then give it to the other woman. So very much in tune with human nature and using God's discernment and wisdom to bring about this great ruling in Israel. And of course, it had an impact on everyone. They thought it was just amazing. And so one of the characters that we're going to get introduced to today is Hiram. And Hiram will be very important in the coming chapters on how he has a commercial relationship with Solomon and Israel specific, and that will continue. And this is actually a relief. That is King Hiram, and he has an entourage coming to give him tribute. And if we go to the next slide, this is the actual, well, at least it's still the remaining inscription of the tomb of Hiram in what is today Lebanon, and in the old archaeological site of Tyre. And so the Phoenicians and their amazing mercantile empire, and the fact that they have some of the finest lumber in the Levant, the great cedars of Lebanon, will become a trading partner with Solomon and Israel as a kingdom. Very, very important that Israel has trading capacity to go out to the sea and trade with the rest of the world. And this will bring in great wealth to the kingdom of Israel. And I'm going to switch out now and share, and we'll go over the narrative. I want to stop at this point and let there be maybe some discussions on what do you think about the fact that clearly God has waited until the last 20 years for the Solomonic wall that goes around Jerusalem to be archaeologically discovered and verified. Why now? Why not 500 years ago? Many people said there is no material evidence of the kingdom of David and the kingdom of Solomon. It was all a fantasy developed by the people of Israel in exile, by the Jews in exile in Babylon. And here we come with really hard evidence. And so, and that's only come in the last 25 years. And so maybe a discussion on why does God let things happen when he lets them happen, as far as rebuilding faith, establishing his presence. And I'll pause there and let there be some great discussion. We're going to pick it up now, a little bit of overlap, but I thought this is very important. On 1 Kings chapter 4, we begin to understand the vast court, if you will, the governmental function of Solomon. And it says, King Solomon was king over all Israel, and these were his high officials: Azariah, the son of Zadok, the Kohen or priest, Elikoreph, and Achiah, the son of Shishai, the secretaries, Jehoshaphat, the son of Achilud, secretary of state, Benaniah, the son of Jehoiada, commander of the army, Ebiatar, also a priest, a Kohanim, Azariah, son of Natan, chief administrator, Zevud, the son of Natan, the king's trusted counselors. I find that interesting that here is the powerful prophet Natan, so effective in David's life, and very important if we remember a couple of coup attempts, and Natan was clearly making sure that God's will, David's will, would place Solomon on the throne. And here are now his sons, very trusted in Solomon's government. Akshar, in charge of the palace. Adoniram, the son of Abda, in charge of forced labor. That's interesting. Adoniram, son of Abda, in charge of forced labor. So you got forced labor going on. Solomon had 12 officers over Israel who were in charge of providing food and supplies for the king and his household. Each one was in charge of provisions for 1 month of the year. They were the sons of Hur in the hills of Ephraim, the son of Bekar and Makatz, Sha'alabim, Bet Shemesh, Elon Bet Hanan, the son of Hesed, and Arubat. He was also had charge of Sukkot in the territory of Hefer. The son of Abinadab in all the areas of Dor had Tephat, the daughter of Solomon, as his wife. So some of his officials were sons-in-law. Ba'ana, the son of Achilud in Tanakah and Megiddo, and all Bet-Shean, by Tzaran, below Yisrael, from Bet-Shean to Abel Mokolah, as far as Yokan, the son of Giver, and Ramat Gilad. He was in charge of the villages of Yair, the son of Manasseh, in Gilad, and in charge of the region of Argob in Bashan, 60 large cities with walls and bronze bars. Achinadab, the son of Edo, in Machaniam, and Achimatz in Naphtali. He also took Basmat, the daughter of Solomon, his wife. Now, Basmat is actually an Egyptian name. And so perhaps this is the daughter of Pharaoh and Solomon. But Basmat is an Egyptian name. Very interesting to see that. Benaiah, the son of Hushai and Asher, and in Alot, Yehoshaphat, the son of Paruka, and Yeshakar, Shimei, the son of Eli, and Benjamin, and Giver, the son of Uri, in the land of Gilad. the country of Shechon, king of the Amori, and Og, king of Bashan. Overall, these were there was one administrator in the land, Yehuda, and Israel were as numerous as sand grains on the seashore. They ate, drank, and enjoyed themselves. And so, what is the forced labor? We don't know. Who's in charge of making sure that these 12 districts bring in food every month? Well, it's clearly listed. They're very close to Sholomon's. In some cases, they're sons-in-law. But what's very interesting about this is there is never assigned from Yehuda or Judah any forced labor or what's called corvée provisioning or corvée labor. Only the other tribes. And you can kind of sense that this tension between Judah, Yehuda, and the other tribes is really set up by Solomon, and these tensions will build even during his reign, and we'll read about that. Already in the reign of David, there had been no less than 3 attempts to overthrow his regime, his kingdom. 2 of them were clearly calls of division between Israel and the kingdom of Judah. And so this tension point between the north and the south, between the other tribes, the other northern tribes in Judah, will continue, and it will become, it'll come to a climax. As we get into chapter 5, and let me stop there. Let me back up, and we need a pause here. So one of the things that is very consistent in the scripture is that nothing good comes from showing favoritism. And even though it's not said directly, the fact that no overseer of corvée labor or corvée supplies is listed for Judah, and you can kind of assume that the Yehudites get off scot-free under Solomon, then favoritism is set up. I'm going to stop here and let's have a discussion perhaps on why is favoritism first of all, wrong and a sin. Why is it so destructive? And especially within a family, or you could say within a city or a state or even an entire nation. Why is favoritism always destructive? We'll take a pause here, have a good discussion on that. And we're going to come back and finish out this lesson with chapter 5 and in the narrative, and have again a couple of moments to stop and discuss. So Solomon ruled over all the kingdoms from the great Euphrates in the ancient world, whether it was in Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, Assyrian, Persian, later the Hellenistic age, Greek. The great river is always the Euphrates. Now, the Nile is a great river, but it's always referred to in the ancient texts and in the scriptures as the Nile. And so the great Euphrates River, through the land of the Plishtim to the border of Egypt, they paid tribute and served Solomon as long as he lived. And so all of this land, people in modern day Syria, people in modern day Lebanon, people in modern day Jordan, people all the way up, I would say even a little bit of south and eastern Turkey, certainly a big chunk of western Iraq, all the way down to the borders of Egypt. And it's very clear here that the Philistines, though they are not incorporated, they are clearly under and pay tribute to Solomon. So that's a complete change of fortune, where these, if you recall, going back to our study of Joshua, how the Plishtim, the Philistines, had the technology, they had the culture, they had the iron, and now things have changed dramatically. So here's some idea of the wealth now pouring into the kingdom. Solomon's provisions for one day consisted of 150 bushels of fine flour, 310 bushels of meal, 10 fattened oxen, 20 pasture-fed oxen, 100 sheep, in addition to deer, gazelles, roebucks, and fattened poultry. For he ruled all the area this side of the great, here we go, Euphrates River, from Tishach to Azah. He was over all the kings on this side of the river, and he had peace all around him on every side, from Dan to Beersheba. Yehuda and Israel lived securely, everyone under his vine and fig tree throughout the lifetime of Solomon. Solomon also had 40,000 stalls for the horses used with his chariots and 12,000 horsemen. Those officers supplied food and other materials for King Solomon and for everyone whom Solomon provided. Each one was responsible for his month's supplies. They saw to it that nothing was lacking. They also made sure that there was barley and straw where it was needed for the horses and the draft animals. Each filled his quota. I don't have it on the slide deck this week, but I will next week. I've been to Megiddo, one of the great fortified cities that Solomon built up. And you can see, you get to the excavation point of the 10th century BCE, and you see where there are these massive stalls for horses. And if you say, well, my gosh, at any time there may be a service of 1,000 horses and then other horses in the pastures, and then you multiply that by 3 major cities, Hatzor, Megiddo, Beersheba, and then maybe a dozen other fortified towns, literally from the Euphrates of northern Syria all the way down to what's called the Valley of Egypt, right at the Sinai. I can see 40,000 horses in his service without a doubt. And it says, Adonai Elohim gave Solomon exceptional wisdom and understanding, as well as a heart as vast as the sandy beach of the sea. And we read that with the slide deck. Solomon's wisdom surpassed the wisdom of the peoples of the East and all the wisdom of Egypt. And that's a huge statement. That's wiser than anybody coming out of Babylon or the older cities of Ur or Uruk or Nippur, the great citadels of Ashur. Later would become Nineveh. All of the wisdom in Egypt, literally from the cataracts down through Thebes and Memphis, all of the great wisdom stored for thousands of years, wiser than all of that. And so, and as the slide deck said, here's some people that he's even wiser than. And he composed a tremendous amount of proverbs or sayings of the wise and songs, or as we know, psalms, the Tehillim. And I love the fact that he could discuss everything as you could say scientific, from zoology to botany, to probably chemistry, to physics. All these things he could discuss. And here comes the point. People from all nations came to hear the wisdom of Solomon, including kings from all over the earth who had heard his wisdom. And we're going to stop there. And I'd love for you guys to discuss for a few minutes, what is the difference between knowledge, data, wisdom, and discernment? And take quite a few minutes here to discuss those. Knowledge, data, wisdom, and discernment. Okay, we're going to come back now. In the slide deck, we introduced Hiram, king of Zor, or Tyre, and sent his service to Solomon because he had heard that they had anointed him king in his father's place. Hiram had always loved David. And this is interesting. So David was beloved. It wasn't just a treaty with Hiram and the Phoenicians. Hiram loved David. They did things well together. They honored one another's treaties. Solomon returned his message to Hiram. You know that David, my father, wasn't able to build a house for the name of Adonai his God because of the wars that beset him from every side, until Adonai put his enemies under the soles of my feet. But now Adonai my God has given me rest on every side. There is neither adversary nor calamity. So now I intend to build a house for the name of Adonai my God, in keeping with what Adonai said to David my father. Your son, whom I will put on your throne in your place, will be the one to build the house for my name. Therefore, order your people to cut down cedars from Lebanon for me. My servants will be your servants. I will pay your servants according to everything you say, for you know that we have no one among us as skilled in felling trees as the Sidonians. When Hiram heard Solomon's message, he was very happy and said, Blessed be Adonai today, who has given David a wise son to rule his great people. Then Hiram sent Solomon this message. I have heard the message you sent me, and I will do everything you want concerning the cedar logs and cypress logs. My servants will bring them down from Lebanon to the sea. I will make them into rafts. By the way, that's very smart. I mean, good night. You don't want to haul this stuff over land. So we're going to come down from the forest, get down to the sea, make rafts out of them. And then I'm going to float them down, and you tell me where to pick them up. You will compensate me by providing food for my household. So Hiram gave Solomon all the cedar logs and cypress logs he wanted. Solomon gave Hiram 100,000 bushels of wheat as food for his household and 1,000 gallons of oil from pressed olives. This is what Solomon gave Hiram each year. Adonai gave Solomon wisdom as he had promised him, and there was peace between Hiram and Solomon. The two of them formed an alliance together. King Solomon conscripted 30,000 men from Israel for forced labor. He sent them to Lebanon in monthly relays of 10,000, and they would stay a month in Lebanon and 2 months at home. Adoniram was in charge of the forced labor. Solomon had 70,000 men to carry loads, another 80,000 stonecutters in the hills, besides Solomon's 3,300 supervisors who were in charge of the people doing the work. The king gave these orders. They quarried large stones, expensive stones, to lay the foundation of the house with cut stone. Solomon and Hiram's builders, along with the men from Gabal, worked the stones to prepare the timber stones for building the house. And so a massive building operation is underway. The supplies comes from north in Lebanon with the cedar. He's got special stone cutters that are out cutting and quarrying very special stones to make this fabulous and beautiful, beautiful, not just a structure, many structures, including the walls that we talked about at the very beginning. And what is underway is a economic enterprise, the likes of which nothing has been seen in the Levant. The only place this even comes close to would be in Egypt or maybe in Sumer. And so Solomon is about to bring the concentrated knowledge and wealth and capability, and the result will be the great temple that he will build in Jerusalem. We're going to close with that, and it'd be great to have some just discussions on what kind of organization does it take, what kind of wisdom does it take, what kind of planning does it take to move this amount of material and people working constantly towards a common goal. And maybe a final discussion as you close out on why is organization so powerful and leadership so powerful? Good leadership with right planning, with the right material, the right people power can do amazing things. We'll close with that, and thank you very much for listening, and we look forward to our future journeys moving forward as we study out the amazing scriptures, and now we're in the Kings. All right, take care.